If you clicked on this video, you probably own a decade-old copy of like Jane Eyre that you were gifted by maybe your ex-boyfriend's sister that you always kind of assumed was smarter than him or something to that effect. Today, you have reached the checkpoint in your algorithm that is telling you it's time to read that book, and I'm going to tell you exactly how you're going to do it. When I talk about a classic in the context of this video and of my greater channel, what I generally mean is a book, generally a novel, that was published at least 50 years ago and is still in print today. It's not set in stone, but that's generally what I mean when I talk of a classic in this context. That's my personal definition. It is not verified with any literary scholars, but that is fine, because actually this is not about literary scholarship. This is about reading a good fucking book. Classics are just good books. The only thing that makes them special is that people have thought they are good for a very long time. They are not coveted or like intellectually superior to contemporary novels. They have simply been popular the longest. Of course, that is not generally how we are taught to view classics or really any higher art form, which is what I would assume makes it hard for a lot of contemporary fiction enjoyers to actually get into classic literature. But good art does not need heavy research or profound knowledge of like 18th century French court politics, although that sometimes can help. Time and location hardly matter to good art. And I think that is precisely what schools and maybe you get wrong about reading classics. It is the fact that classics are art, just like I think all literature is art. There's bad art. It's still art though, unless it's AI generated. That's garbage. And that is honestly all you need to know about how to read a classic. You need to look at it like it's good fucking art. And I believe that you can pick up Jane Eyre or maybe The Picture of Dorian Gray, probably Pride and Prejudice. I feel like those are the classics you have in your home. You can pick that up right now and read it and have a grand old time. But if you want to have just a little bit of extra insight into how to make this experience work for you, stick around. Because here's the thing, the language of an older novel might still be hard for you. Not having certain context might still hinder your reading experience. So we need to address those things before you come into a situation where you do not like a book because of the hindrances you're experiencing with it. A while back, I watched a video by Khalilah where she was reading The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, which I personally think is one of the best novels of all time. It's one of my all-time favorite books. I think it's an absolutely outstanding and fantastic novel. And she was reading it in one of her reading blogs, and she was constantly talking about she didn't get it, she couldn't keep up with the language, she was drifting off, she felt like she was missing the point. And the entire time that she was talking, I was like internally screaming for her to please Google. That is the secret. That is the secret to getting classic literature. I think that there are so many factors that might hinder your reading experience, especially with older books. Be it the language, certain historical clues, certain geographical clues. These are all factors that can make your reading experience strenuous and difficult. So you want to fill in those knowledge gaps as best as you can. And one of the great things about classics is that there's so many people that love these books passionately. As I said, classics are just books that have been popular for a long time. And so there are hundreds, if not thousands, people over centuries that have written and talked about how fucking good a certain book is. You have all the resources you need to have a fantastic experience at the tip of your fingertips, and I would encourage you to use them. And I know I'm making it sound like school. This is often what we're taught to do in school, like do a lot of extra research, over-intellectualize stuff, and I am telling you right now that is not what this needs to be. But I'm telling you, maybe watch like a 10-minute introduction to a certain author. I recently started reading Bleak House by Charles Dickens, and I have read Charles Dickens before, but I still find him incredibly intimidating. And so I watched, I don't remember what the title of the video is, but I'll leave a link down below. By Books and Things, she did like an introduction to Charles Dickens, and she just talked about like general themes that are important in his novels, things to keep in mind about how they were published and of the historic period. And I find that even though it was a relatively short video and super generalized because it was just Charles Dickens, it still helps me now as I'm reading Bleak House to remind myself of the things that she's bringing up. For example, Charles Dickens is meant to be fucking entertaining. You're not supposed to take everything seriously. He's also going to introduce and reintroduce characters over and over again because people were reading these books for a long period of time. You do not need to keep track of all of that. I think this research part is truly where school fails us, because even though I'm kind of telling you to do exactly what you did in school, I actually think that this makes it more fun. The purpose of reading is for it to be fun. I don't care what anyone says. If I'm reading in my free time, no matter how smart and intellectual and informative the book, I will still want to be entertained and have a good time. And what I'm telling you is, if you do a little bit of research, just a little, you will have a better time. If you put in a little bit of work up front into reading a book, it will pay off in the long run. I think when I was reading Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky, there was like a chunk in there in the first third where after every chapter, I would look up the chapter summary in SparkNotes to like make sure I got it and I understood what was going on, because in the long run, I was able to like stay more focused on the text and stay kind of mentally where Fyodor Dostoyevsky intended for me to stay. But that was because from the get-go, I really put in the effort to be immersed in the story and to really understand what was going on. I think that that is what you need to prioritize. If you start a book and you find it's going slowly, you don't understand what's happening, you find yourself drifting off, identify where that's coming from, because some books are just badly written. Some books are not for you, even if they are classics, and that's fine. But if you can identify, oh, the language isn't for me. Oh, I actually just have no idea what's going on. I'm so annoyed at this character because I actually just don't understand the historic perspective of this character. You can identify those knowledge gaps and you can fill them. And I promise you, it is going to make a huge difference for you and your reading experience in the long run. And I also promise you it's not going to be difficult. As I said, for most classics, especially for like the Jane Eyres and Pictures of Dorian Grains of this world, there is so much additional reading. And if you want to get into a specific author, look up that author and like beginner's guide and just see what comes up. There's so many great free resources on the internet. And I honestly think that's the only thing that makes me able to read and be fulfilled by as many classics as I am. Sorry about that. Also, caveat, if you get a classics edition of any book, be it a Penguin classic, an Oxford Wells classic, whatever, they will usually have an introduction. And even though everything I just told you might compel you to look at that introduction, do not. It is going to be filled with spoilers. It will tell you everything that happens in that book, because the point of the introduction is generally to provide context for students, which you're not. If you're not a student like me, you don't care. So it's going to introduce all the themes and it's going to provide analysis of the text, which to do those things you need context, aka spoilers. Do not look at the introductions. Sometimes when I really love the book, I will read the introduction afterwards, but generally do not bother, okay? Turn to the internet, where people are just genuinely excited to make you excited about this book. I also want to add, do not expect contemporary novel reading comprehension and reading speed. I see a lot of people get like frustrated because they take so long reading classics and I feel like they're just so stuck in the text. You are going to be slower. There's nothing I can do about it. You are going to read it slower than you read contemporary novels for a multitude of reasons. The language is going to sound weird. You don't actually know what's going on, even sometimes when you think you know. Your brain is just putting in more effort to fill in there are a lot more knowledge gaps when you're reading a classic generally. So your brain has to work a lot harder to fill in those knowledge gaps. It's going to slow you down, and that is so fine. Okay, I cannot stress enough how okay it is. Not all classic books are going to do this, and not every reader is going to experience it, but generally I think go in with low expectations as to when you're going to finish this book. I have read classics, specifically classics, for like months before I finished them. Crime and Punishment, I finished that took me like 7 months to read, maybe 8. So you're fine, okay? You're fine, just chip at it one bit at a time. You can put things down and pick them back up again later. You're so fine. And that, people, is kind of the only advice I think you need to read a classic. Identify your knowledge gaps and fill them. Invest a little bit of additional reading into your classics experience. I think it's going to pay off so much in the long run. And don't expect too much of yourself. Expect to be slow, expect to need to look up things, and you're going to be fine, okay? I have such faith in you. When I first got into reading classics, I was 17 years old. I had literally not finished a book in like probably 2 years. And I have only ever read like maybe 5 books in English in total before I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, okay? You do not need to be overtly smart. You do not need to be a student or a teacher in order to read those books. They are meant to be entertaining. They're meant to touch you. They are meant to be art, okay? And art is what makes us human. They're meant to bring you closer to the human experience. And I hope that you have a wonderful experience finally picking up Jane Eyre. Let me know what you think of it. And if you're not picking up Jane Eyre next, what are you reading? Which classic have you had maybe on your shelf for a little too long? Or which one did you just learn about and are very excited for? I would be so happy to know. Leave a like and a comment, please. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!